He called her useless, a maid who didn't belong in his house, unaware she had been silently loving him his entire life. When she finally revealed the truth, he laughed in her face and threw her out. But days later, a single DNA test shattered everything he thought he knew. Now the powerful CEO must face the one truth he can't control. What happens when the woman you disrespected is actually your mother? Hello fam, welcome to True Love Stories, where we share interesting and intriguing stories. Please do well to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Do not forget to like and share with your loved ones. Now let's dive into the story. Atlanta moved fast. Glass towers, black luxury cars, rooftop deals sealed over aged whiskey. And right in the center of it all was Marcus Sterling. At just 32, Marcus had already mastered the art of power. His presence was precise, tailored suits, gold watch, fresh low-cut fade always sharp. He spoke with intention, moved with control, and trusted very few people. In his world, perception was currency, and weakness had no place. That's why Alana Brooks didn't fit. She wasn't part of the polished skyline. She came from the quieter parts of the city, where life was harder, but people were real. She wore her natural curls freely back then, often pulled into a puff or wrapped in colorful scarves. She had a calm spirit, observant eyes, and a strength that didn't need to be loud. Their connection had been unexpected. Brief, intense, and then complicated. When Alana told Marcus she was pregnant, everything changed. They met in his high-rise office overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Atlanta's skyline, but Marcus barely glanced at it. His attention was locked on her. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice controlled but tight. Alana nodded, hands resting protectively over her stomach. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." Silence filled the room. Marcus turned away, running a hand over his face. His mind was already calculating: investors, board members, public image, timing. A child would disrupt everything. "I'll take care of it," he said finally. Alana frowned. "Take care of what?" He turned back, pulling open a drawer and sliding out a checkbook. "This situation," he replied flatly. "You won't have to worry about anything financially." Her expression hardened. "You think I came here for money?" "That's what most people want," he said without hesitation. "I'm not most people." There was a pause, one that stretched longer than Marcus was comfortable with. "Then what do you want?" he asked. Alana swallowed, her voice softer now, but steady. "I want my child to know his father." Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's not possible." "Why?" "Because of your image," she challenged. "Because of reality," he shot back. "I have responsibilities. A reputation. I can't just." "You mean you won't?" That hit. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alana said something that neither of them would ever forget. "I'll disappear from your world, but don't take my child away from me." Marcus studied her carefully. He saw no manipulation, no greed, just desperation and love. It unsettled him. Months later, after countless tense conversations, they reached an agreement. A secret. When Elijah was born, he would be raised in Marcus's home, given every opportunity, every advantage. And Alana would stay, but not as his mother, as the help. The Sterling mansion was nothing short of breathtaking. Modern architecture, marble floors, high ceilings that carried every sound just a little too far. On the day Alana arrived, she stood at the grand entrance holding a small suitcase, her heart heavy but resolute. A house manager handed her the uniform. A crisp black and white maid outfit, structured, spotless, impersonal. The white apron tied neatly at the waist, the contrast stark against the dark fabric. It wasn't just clothing. It was a boundary, a role she would have to live in. Alana changed in silence, staring at herself in the mirror afterward. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Not because of the uniform, but because of what it represented. She was about to become invisible in her own child's life. When she first held Elijah in that house, it took everything in her not to break. He was so small, so perfect. She memorized every detail, the softness of his skin, the rhythm of his breathing, the way his tiny fingers wrapped around hers. Miss Alana will be helping take care of him, Marcus had said to the staff, his tone professional, detached. Miss Alana. Not Mom. Never Mom. And she agreed to it, because being close, even like this, was better than not being there at all. Days turned into months. Alana moved through the mansion quietly, efficiently, always in her black and white uniform, always just outside the line she wasn't allowed to cross. But when no one was watching, her true role showed. She was the one who rocked Elijah to sleep when he cried through the night, the one who hummed soft gospel tunes under her breath, the one who whispered, "I love you," even though he was too young to understand. Marcus noticed. Not openly, but he noticed. He saw how calm Elijah became in her arms, how her presence grounded the child in a way nothing else did. And for a man who controlled everything, it was one of the few things he didn't interfere with. Because deep down he knew. This arrangement might have been his decision. But the love? That belonged entirely to her. And so, under one roof, a powerful father built an empire. A hidden mother wore a uniform. And a child grew up surrounded by both, without knowing the truth that would one day change everything. By the time Elijah turned 6, the Sterling mansion had transformed, not in structure, but in atmosphere. What was once quiet and controlled had become something colder, more calculated, because Danielle Carter had arrived. Their wedding had been everything Atlanta's elite expected, lavish, exclusive, and strategic. Danielle wasn't just a bride, she was a business move. The daughter of a powerful mogul, she brought connections, influence, and a level of social polish that matched Marcus's ambition perfectly. She looked the part effortlessly, flawless skin, designer gowns, and hair that was always immaculate, whether styled in a bone-straight silk press or laid into a sleek, sculpted ponytail. Her presence turned heads, but her warmth, that was harder to find. The first time Danielle met Elijah, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "So this is him," she said, looking the boy over like he was a detail to be acknowledged rather than a child to be embraced. Elijah, standing behind Marcus's leg, peeked out quietly. His hair was neatly shaped into a soft taper, his wide eyes full of curiosity. "Say hello," Marcus instructed. "Hi," Elijah said softly. Danielle crouched slightly, just enough to appear polite. "Hello, Elijah," she replied, her voice smooth but distant. Then she stood. And that was it. No hug. No warmth. No attempt. Alana saw everything. From her place just a few steps away, in her black and white maid uniform, hands folded neatly in front of her, she watched the moment unfold with a quiet ache in her chest. She already knew what kind of role Danielle would play. And more importantly, what kind she wouldn't. As the months passed, the household settled into a new rhythm. Marcus became busier than ever, often leaving before sunrise and returning long after Elijah was asleep. Danielle filled the house with elegance, but not affection. She hosted dinners, attended galas, and maintained the image of a perfect wife. But when it came to Elijah, her involvement was minimal. She made decisions about his schooling, his tutors, his schedule, but never his feelings. "Discipline builds strength," she once told Marcus over dinner. "Love builds weakness." Marcus didn't argue, and Elijah learned quickly. The only place warmth existed was in the quiet corners of the house. In the early mornings, when sunlight slipped through the kitchen windows, Alana would make Elijah breakfast before anyone else was awake. "You gotta eat, baby," she'd say gently, sliding a plate toward him. Elijah would sit at the counter, legs swinging slightly, watching her. "You always know when I'm hungry," he once said. Alana smiled softly. Just a lucky guess. But it wasn't luck. It was instinct. As he grew older, Elijah began to notice the differences he couldn't quite explain. Other kids talked about their moms, how they hugged them, laughed with them, showed up to school events with loud cheers and warm smiles. Danielle showed up, but always composed. Always distant. She clapped politely, never enthusiastically, and she never stayed long. One afternoon after school, Elijah asked a question that lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. "Why doesn't she like me?" The room went still. Alana, who had been folding laundry nearby, froze for just a second before recovering. "What makes you think that?" she asked carefully. Elijah shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "She don't talk to me like that. Not like other moms." Alana's chest tightened. She wanted so badly to tell him the truth, to pull him close and say, "Because I'm your mother. Because I'm right here." But she couldn't. So instead, she walked over, gently adjusting his shirt collar. "She just shows things differently," Alana said softly. Elijah didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway, because children learn early how to accept what they don't understand. By the time Elijah reached his teenage years, the emotional gap had widened into something permanent. He stopped asking questions, stopped expecting warmth, stopped needing anyone. His style changed. His hair now kept in a sharp low fade, his posture more rigid, his expressions harder to read. He carried himself like someone older, someone who had already figured out that softness didn't get you far. Danielle approved of that. "He's learning," she told Marcus one evening. Marcus simply nodded. But Alana noticed something else. He wasn't just learning. He was hardening. Their interactions became fewer, but sharper. "Don't hover," Elijah snapped one afternoon when Alana lingered near his room. "I was just making sure you." "I said I got it." She stepped back immediately. "Okay," she said quietly. But later that night, she still left a plate of food outside his door. He never acknowledged it, but it was always gone by morning. The mansion, despite its size and beauty, felt divided in invisible ways. Marcus and Danielle lived in one world, structured, ambitious, emotionally distant. Elijah lived in another, guarded, observant, slowly building walls. And Alana, she existed in between, never fully seen, never fully acknowledged, but always there, watching, waiting, loving him from a distance that grew harder to bear with each passing year. Because the truth was becoming clearer every day. Elijah wasn't just growing up without a mother. He was growing up without knowing what love felt like. And the only person who could have shown him was the one forced to hide it behind a uniform. The night everything changed didn't come with warning. No slow build. No chance to prepare. Just a phone call. Elijah had just gotten home from a late study session. At 18, he was already carrying himself like someone older. Broad shoulders, sharp low fade always clean, dressed in dark, fitted clothes that matched his mood more often than not. The mansion was quiet. Too quiet. He had just dropped his keys onto the marble counter when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello," he answered. "Is this Elijah Sterling?" A voice asked, formal and urgent. "Yes." There was a pause. "The kind that changes everything. I'm calling from Northside Hospital. Your parents have been in an accident." The drive to the hospital felt unreal. Streetlights blurred. The city moved, but Elijah felt frozen inside it. By the time he arrived, everything had already been decided for him. A doctor. A quiet hallway. That look people give when there's nothing left to say. "I'm sorry." That's all he really heard. Marcus Sterling gone. Danielle Sterling gone. Just like that. Grief didn't hit Elijah the way people expected. He didn't collapse. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. Not then. He stood still, jaw tight, eyes dry, hands clenched at his sides. Processing. Or maybe protecting himself from it. Because deep down, Elijah had already learned something important. Feeling too much made you weak. And weakness didn't survive in his world. The funeral was a spectacle. Black cars lined the street. Atlanta's elite showed up in perfect formation. Tailored suits, dark dresses, polished condolences. He's so young. Such a tragedy. Marcus built an empire. Elijah stood at the front, dressed in an all-black suit, posture straight, expression unreadable. His hair was freshly cut, edges sharp, everything about him controlled. People shook his hand, offered sympathy, but no one really saw him. Except one person. Alana. Standing further back, still in her black and white maid uniform, hands clasped tightly together, eyes filled with quiet pain. Not just for Marcus and Danielle, but for her son. She watched him carry the weight of the world without flinching. And it scared her. Within weeks, reality replaced mourning. Lawyers, board members, executives, all sitting around a long glass table, looking at Elijah not as a grieving teenager, but as the new CEO. "It's what your father would have wanted," one of them said. Elijah didn't hesitate. "I'll take it," he replied. No emotion, no doubt, just decision. The transition was immediate, brutal. Elijah went from high school senior to corporate leader overnight. Early mornings turned into sleepless nights. Meetings stacked on meetings. Expectations pressed in from every direction. But he didn't crack. He adapted. Fast. At first, people underestimated him. "He's just a kid. He won't last." They were wrong. Elijah learned quickly, and more importantly, he learned how to control a room. His voice became sharper. His tone colder. His patience almost non-existent. "I don't pay you to guess. I pay you to know," he snapped at a senior executive during one meeting. Silence followed. No one challenged him again. Fear replaced doubt. And in Elijah's mind, that was respect. Back at the mansion, things changed too. The house felt bigger now. Emptier. But Elijah didn't acknowledge it. He filled the silence with work, structure, control. Staff schedules became stricter. Expectations higher. Mistakes? Unacceptable. And unfortunately, Alana wasn't an exception. One morning, she accidentally knocked over a glass while cleaning his office. The sound shattered through the room. Elijah looked up immediately, irritation flashing across his face. "Are you serious right now?" he said coldly. "I'm sorry," Alana replied quickly, already kneeling to clean it. "You've been here how long and you still can't get simple things right?" The words cut deeper than the situation deserved. But Elijah didn't see that. He only saw imperfection. And imperfection reminded him of chaos. "I'll fix it," she said softly. "You better," he muttered, already looking back at his laptop. Moments like that became more frequent. Short comments, sharp criticism, dismissive glances. To everyone else, it was just Elijah being Elijah, the cold, demanding CEO. But to Alana, it was something else entirely. It was her son, and he was slipping further away. Late at night, when the mansion finally settled into silence, Elijah would sometimes sit alone in his office, staring out at the city. Atlanta still moved. Still alive. Still loud. But inside him, there was nothing. No grief. No softness. Just pressure. Responsibility. And a constant need to stay in control. Because the moment he stopped, everything he'd buried might rise to the surface. And he didn't know how to face that. So instead, he built something stronger than grief. Stronger than pain. A version of himself that didn't feel. Didn't bend. Didn't break. But what Elijah didn't realize was this. The same walls protecting him were also isolating him from everyone, including the one person who had never left his side. And as his power grew, so did the distance between him and the truth. A truth that had been standing right in front of him, dressed in a black and white uniform, loving him silently, while he slowly became someone she barely recognized. Power had settled into Elijah Sterling like a second skin. By 25, he wasn't just running the company. He was the company. His name carried weight in every room. His decisions moved markets. His presence alone could silence conversations. But with that power came something else. Distance. Not just from people, but from anything that resembled softness. The Sterling mansion reflected that shift. Gone were the small traces of warmth that once lived in its corners. Everything was sharper now, cleaner, colder, quieter. Staff moved with precision, speaking only when necessary, careful not to draw attention. Because attention meant risk. And risk often meant Elijah's temper. He had become known for it. Not loud, uncontrolled anger, but something worse. Controlled cruelty. The kind that came out in short, cutting sentences. Calm tone. Direct eye contact. No room for defense. You're inefficient. Fix it or leave. I don't repeat myself. That was Elijah Sterling. and no one was exempt. Especially not Alana. Time had touched her gently but visibly. There were faint lines around her eyes now, her movements a little slower, but her presence remained steady. Her locks were often wrapped neatly under a scarf, and her black and white maid uniform was always pressed, always perfect. She carried herself with quiet dignity, even when he didn't. "Miss Alana." His voice echoed from the living room one morning. She appeared almost instantly. "Yes." Elijah didn't look up from his tablet. "This place is starting to look neglected." Her eyes scanned the spotless room, confused but careful not to show it. "I cleaned everything this morning." "Then clean it again." A pause. Not defiance, just exhaustion. "Of course," she said softly. It wasn't about the cleaning. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about control. And somewhere deep down, Elijah needed everything around him to stay in order. Because inside, nothing was. That afternoon, something small set him off. A meeting had gone wrong. A deal delayed. Investors questioning his decisions. By the time he got home, tension sat heavy on his shoulders. Alana was in the dining area, adjusting the table setting. "Elijah, I didn't ask you to make anything." Her words stopped mid-sentence. "I just thought." "That's the problem," he cut in sharply, finally looking at her. "You think too much for someone in your position." The room went still. Those words hung heavier than usual. Alana swallowed, steadying herself. "I was just trying to." "You're trying to do more than you're paid for," he said coldly. "Stick to your job." Something shifted in her then. Not anger. Not defiance. But something deeper. A quiet breaking point. "I've always done more," she said gently. Elijah frowned slightly, caught off guard by her tone. "And that's exactly why boundaries exist," he replied. "So people don't forget where they stand." Her hands tightened slightly at her sides. "Do you really believe that?" she asked. His expression hardened instantly. "Believe what?" "That people are only worth the roles you give them." A dangerous question. The kind no one ever asked him. Elijah stood up slowly. "You're crossing a line." Alana took a breath. "I crossed that line a long time ago," she said, her voice still soft, but no longer fragile. Silence filled the space between them. For the first time in years, she wasn't shrinking. And Elijah didn't like it. "You're fired." The words came out flat. Final. Like a signature at the bottom of a contract. The air shifted. Even the staff nearby froze, pretending not to listen. Alana blinked slowly, as if giving herself a moment to fully hear it. "You don't mean that," she said quietly. "I do." His gaze didn't waver. "You've been here long enough. I tolerated it. That's over." "Tolerated," she repeated under her breath. For a second, it looked like she might walk away. Accept it. Disappear quietly like she had always promised to do. But then, "I can't leave." Her voice cracked just slightly. Elijah's jaw tightened. "That's not your decision." "It is," she said, shaking her head. "You don't understand." "Then explain it," he snapped. And there it was. The moment she had spent years avoiding. The truth she had buried under uniforms, silence, and sacrifice. The truth that had lived in every glance, every quiet act of love. "I'm your mother." The words landed. But they didn't settle. Elijah stared at her. Then, he laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. Sharp, cold, dismissive. "That's what we're doing now," he said, shaking his head. "You think I'm stupid?" Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I stayed because of you," she said. "Every day. Every year. I stayed because I couldn't leave my son." "You're not my mother," he said instantly, his voice dropping lower. "My mother is dead." "I'm not talking about Danielle," she whispered. That hit something, but not enough. "Not yet." "Stop," he said sharply. "Just stop. It's the truth." "It's a story," he corrected. "And not a good one." Her voice trembled now. "Ask your father." "He's gone," Elijah snapped. "So whatever lie you're trying to build, it ends here." Silence. Heavy. Painful. Final. Alana nodded slowly. Not because she agreed, but because she understood. He wasn't ready. And maybe he never would be. I never wanted anything from you, she said quietly. Not your money. Not your name. She took a small step back. I just wanted to be close enough to love you. Elijah didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't soften. Goodbye, Elijah. She turned and walked away. Still in her black and white uniform. Still carrying the same quiet strength she had walked in with years ago. But this time, she was leaving empty. The front door closed softly behind her. No dramatic sound. No final words. Just silence. And for the first time in a long time, the mansion felt too big. Too quiet. Too empty. Elijah stood there alone. Jaw tight. Expression unchanged. Convincing himself it didn't matter. That she didn't matter. That none of it was real. But deep down, something had shifted. A crack. Small. Almost invisible. But enough to let doubt in. The first night after Alana left, Elijah didn't notice the silence. Not immediately. He moved through the mansion like he always did. Measured steps, focused mind, phone in hand. Emails. Calls. Numbers. Decisions. Control. Everything exactly how he liked it. But the second night, something felt off. Subtle. Unsettling. It started with small things. No soft footsteps early in the morning. No quiet clinking of dishes before sunrise. No presence lingering just outside his space. The house was still running. Staff doing their jobs, everything spotless, everything in place. But something was missing. And for the first time, Elijah noticed. He tried to ignore it. Told himself it was routine. Adjustment. Nothing more. She was just staff, he muttered once under his breath, as if saying it out loud would make it true. But his mind didn't listen. Because memory has a way of showing up uninvited. It came in flashes. Alana handing him food without asking. Alana waiting up when he came home late. Alana noticing things no one else ever did. And then, her voice. I stayed because I love you. Elijah clenched his jaw, pushing the thought away. No, he said quietly to himself. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. But doubt is persistent. 3 days later, he found himself standing in the kitchen longer than necessary, looking at a plate of food someone else had prepared. It was perfect, technically, but it wasn't right. He couldn't explain it, and that irritated him more than anything. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in his office, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass, his reflection staring back at him. Sharp, composed, controlled. But his eyes, restless. Then another memory surfaced. One he hadn't thought about in years. He was younger, maybe 8 or 9. Sick. Feverish. Half asleep. And someone was there. Cool cloth on his forehead. A soft voice telling him to rest. He couldn't see clearly back then. But now? He could. It was her. Elijah leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Why would she lie? He murmured. But a more uncomfortable question followed. What if she didn't? The next morning, he made a decision. Not emotional. Not impulsive. Strategic. Controlled. I want a DNA test, he told his assistant. There was a slight pause. Understood. Discreet. Obviously. Samples were collected quietly. No announcements. No explanations. Just another task to complete. But waiting was different. For the first time in years, Elijah felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. Not exactly. But something close to it. Days stretched longer than usual. Meetings felt louder. Conversations felt distant. Even his own voice sounded unfamiliar to him at times. Sharp, but distracted. Focused, but not fully present. And then, the results came in. He was alone when he opened them. No audience. No witnesses. Just him. The envelope sat on his desk longer than it should have. Untouched. Heavy. Finally, he picked it up. Opened it. Read. And everything stopped. 99.9% probability. Elijah stared at the paper. Once. Twice. Again. As if the numbers might change. As if reality might correct itself. But it didn't. His grip tightened. Then loosened. Then, the paper slipped from his hand. For the first time since he was a child, Elijah Sterling broke. Not controlled tears. Not quiet emotion. But something deeper. Raw. Unfiltered. Years of restraint cracking all at once. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands covering his face as the weight of it all came crashing down. Every word he had said to her. Every time he dismissed her. Every moment he made her feel small. His mother. She was telling the truth, he whispered, his voice breaking. And suddenly, everything made sense. The way she looked at him. Not like staff. Not like obligation. But like family. The way she stayed. Through everything. Without asking for anything. The way she endured him. Even when he didn't deserve it. Elijah let out a sharp breath, shaking his head as regret settled deep in his chest. I fired her, he said, almost in disbelief. The realization hit harder than anything else. Not just that she was his mother, but that when she finally told him the truth. He laughed. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Elijah stood abruptly, grabbing his keys. For once, there was no calculated plan. No strategy. No control. Just urgency. He needed to find her. Not as a CEO. Not as a man protecting an image. But as a son, who had made a mistake he didn't know how to fix. As he stepped out of the mansion, something felt different. Not lighter. Not yet. But clearer. Because for the first time in his life, Elijah Sterling knew exactly what he had lost. And exactly who he needed to become to get it back. Finding her wasn't easy. Not because she was hiding, but because Elijah had never really known where she came from. All those years, and he had never asked. The realization sat heavy with him as he drove through parts of Atlanta he hadn't visited in years. Streets that didn't shine like Buckhead. Murals on brick walls. Corner stores. People sitting on porches talking, living, real life unfiltered. This was her world. The one she left behind. To stay close to him. He asked around carefully, quietly, using her name, her description. Some people didn't trust him at first. His car alone made him stand out. His presence felt out of place. But eventually, someone pointed him in the right direction. Miss Alana? Yeah, she just moved back not too long ago. Third house down, blue door. Elijah stood across the street for a moment. Just looking. The house was small. Modest. Nothing like the mansion. But something about it felt alive. For the first time in years, Elijah hesitated. Not out of fear, but uncertainty. He had faced boardrooms, billion-dollar deals, powerful men who tried to challenge him, and never once second-guessed himself. But this was different. He walked up to the door. Knocked. Footsteps approached slowly. Then, the door opened. Alana stood there. No uniform. No black and white apron. Just her. Her locks fell naturally over her shoulders, a few strands of gray woven in now. She wore a simple, comfortable outfit, soft, unguarded, real. And for a moment, they just looked at each other. Elijah spoke first. I didn't know. His voice was lower than usual. Not sharp. Not commanding. Just human. Alana studied his face. Not the CEO. Not the man the world feared. But the boy she had raised in silence. I know, she said gently. That was all it took. The tension in his shoulders dropped, just slightly. Enough. I took the test, he continued, holding her gaze. I should have listened to you, but I didn't. His voice tightened. I said things I shouldn't have said. Alana opened the door wider. Come inside. The house was warm. Not in temperature, but in feeling. Family photos lined the walls. Old memories. Pieces of a life Elijah had never been part of. And yet, he felt connected to it. They sat across from each other in a small living room. No distance of power. No titles. Just truth. I was young, Alana began. And you were everything to me the moment I knew you existed. Elijah listened. Really listened. I knew your father's world wasn't built for someone like me, she continued. But I also knew I couldn't stay away from you. Her eyes softened. So I chose the only way I could be close. Elijah swallowed. That uniform, he said quietly. It wasn't about the job, she replied. It was about staying. Silence settled between them. But this time, it wasn't painful. It was understanding. I watched your first steps, she said, a small smile forming. Heard your first words. Stayed up with you when you were sick. Elijah's chest tightened. You remember that? He asked. Every moment, she said softly. He looked down briefly, shaking his head. I thought I was alone. You weren't, she replied. You just didn't know where to look. That hit deeper than anything else. I became someone I don't even recognize, Elijah admitted. Alana tilted her head slightly. No, you became someone who didn't feel safe being soft. He exhaled slowly. That's not who I want to be anymore. Alana didn't rush to respond. She just watched him, measuring, not his words, but his sincerity. Change takes time, she said finally. I know, he replied. I'm not asking for everything at once. He hesitated, then said the word he had never said before. Mom. Alana froze. Just for a second. Her eyes filled instantly, but she didn't look away. Say that again, she whispered. Mom. This time it landed. Fully. Tears slipped down her face as she reached for his hand. And Elijah didn't pull away. For the first time in his life, he didn't need control. He just needed connection. The days that followed weren't perfect. Change didn't happen overnight. But it happened. Elijah started showing up differently. At work, his voice was still firm, but no longer cutting. He listened more. Spoke with intention, not intimidation. People noticed. Not immediately, but gradually. At home, there was no more Miss Alana. No more distance. He brought her back into his life, not as staff, but as family. She didn't return to the mansion as a maid. She returned as his mother. On her terms. They built something new. Something honest. Some mornings he'd stop by her house before work, just to sit, eat, talk. No agenda. No pressure. Other times she'd visit the mansion. And for the first time, she walked through the front door without a uniform. Without boundaries. Without hiding. And slowly, the man who once ruled through fear learned how to lead with understanding. Because power had taught Elijah how to control everything. But love taught him how to be human. And in the end, the thing he had searched for his entire life was never in the boardrooms, never in the money, never in the title. It was in the woman who wore a black and white uniform and loved him anyway. Finally, we have come to the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, do well to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.